Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Legendary Upside channel. Today, we're going over the Week 4 preview show. Today, I'm joined as always with the man himself, Pat Green, and Sackreligious. Guys, how are we doing today?
Doing good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to discussing this week's slate. As we'll do every week, we're going to go through 4 games today. The rest of the great details on the rest of the main slate can be found on legendaryupside.com, but we'll really be going in depth today on 4 separate games. That is the Jaguars at Texans, the Rams at Bears, the Patriots at 49ers, and the Broncos at Jets. For some reason, we're doing that game. So anyways, should be a fun show. We'll dive right into it with the Jaguars at Texans. I want to start this conversation with today, Pat. Are there any reasons for hope in Jacksonville? The Jags are 0-3. They're going into town in Houston against a tough Texans defense, tough secondary there. What are the reasons for hope in Jacksonville, if any?
I think the reason for hope would be that Trevor Lawrence is playing really aggressively. He's got an 11 average depth of target, which is pretty deep. He's also completing a lot of deep, like he's not just chucking the ball up. Sometimes he is. Sometimes he's just missing throws pretty badly. But his average depth of completion is 10, which is one of the higher average depth of completions in the league, and is not very far below his average depth of target. So in some ways, he's like an efficient deep passer. He's also got a 16% deep pass percentage, and his average throw is traveling 2 yards past the first down stick. So this is an aggressive profile. The problem is accuracy is one of the problems. He's got a minus 11% completion percentage over expected, just a 51% completion percentage. And then pressure has been a real issue for him. He's 29% of his pressures are going into sacks. Pressure to sack rate of 29%. That's not very good. He's allowing pressure at a fairly high rate himself. So, he's looking deep downfield, but maybe he should get the ball out a little quicker. And they're not protecting him very well. They rank 27th in pass block grade, 24th in pass block win rate, 17th in pressure rate. The issue this week is they're going up against this Texans pass rush that's pretty good. They're first in pressure rate. They're fifth in pass rush win rate. So theoretically, you could say, if Lawrence had more time to throw, maybe he's not Anthony Richardson, right? But like there's some of that volatility that we think like, okay, if he can connect on a few of those deep throws, all of a sudden his day is made. But this is not a matchup where I'm especially optimistic that he's able to do that because of the pass rush.
Yeah, I did think the comparison to Richardson was interesting. I did pull up this stat. In 2024 so far, Lawrence is second only to Anthony Richardson in average depth of throw at 10.6. That's way up from 8.6 last year in 2023, where Trevor Lawrence was more of sort of middle tier quarterback in terms of average depth of target. He's now second in the league to only Anthony Richardson. So that I think speaks to your point of a really volatile passing system in Jacksonville so far. Question for you, Sack. With that said, sort of on how the Jaguars are passing so far this season, targeting more deep throws than last year. Do you have any sense of how to sort out these Jacksonville pass catchers? To me, it seems like it's been fairly flat so far between the top 3 wide receivers. And I think Evan Ingram is still unlikely to play this week. But yeah, how do you think through the Jacksonville pass catchers this week?
Yeah, if I had to pick one as my favorite, it would be Brian Thomas Jr., just because he's a rookie and he's been able to earn volume early in his career, despite having competition from Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis, although I don't know if you can call Gabe Davis substantial competition.
Yeah, man. I don't know what just to interject here quickly, Gabe Davis, I mean, he's never looked particularly good to me, but something looks weird.
I'm assuming you saw the clip of him running the route next to Brenton Strange and looking like he is just running with cement shoes on. That was
bad him. He looks really slow. Anyways, sorry to interrupt.
But yeah, one of the things that Pat pointed out in the walkthrough that I thought was really interesting, because I initially, prior to reading the walkthrough, had thought maybe this is a sneaky spot to, throw in a Brian Thomas bring back on some Houston stacks, because I've really been liking the Houston stacks this week. I really am interested in that side of the game. But after reading the walkthrough, Pat mentioned, the Texans are able to get pressure with 4, and they do that consistently, and that helps them prevent explosives. And really the whole thesis around like, well, maybe Lawrence could turn it around. We're talking about how volatile he is and how deep, his pass attempts are. But if we're talking about doing that into a defense that is pretty good at consistently getting pressure, which seems to be the Jaguars' weakness, and they're pretty good at limiting those explosives, that just kind of seems like the perfect storm for the Jaguars' woeful start to the season to continue. So it would be contrarian to like the Jaguars guys, and I really tried to get there. I'll probably sprinkle in a tiny bit of Brian Thomas Jr. just for saying like this guy is so uber talented. If he gets the ball in his hands enough times, he might be able to break a play. But outside of him, I'm not terribly interested in Jags pass catchers this week.
Yeah, that's how I lean too. At least with Thomas, I think I can talk myself into 1-2 big plays, and he can get there in DFS or even in your weekly redraft lineups. Like I think he's certainly in the mix in the boom bust wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 range. But man, the other guys, it's tough. Like Christian Kirk, I don't know. He was a guy I was optimistic on starting the year, but I don't even know if you can start him in like your typical 3 wide receiver home leagues. Pat, any takes on Kirk and Brian Thomas this week?
Yeah, I mean, they're all pretty flat in terms of, the underlying stats. I think given that it's week 4 and they're all pretty flat, I'm most interested in the first round rookie. That's like bullish that he's already looking like the wide receiver 1 this early in the season. I think we've gone increasingly impatient with rookies, right? They're all supposed to produce from week 1.
Marvin Harrison is a bust after.
He was literally called a bust after 1 week. Like we've lost.
Well, he is.
Minds. Yeah. No, he's and then like been a star for the 2 weeks after. So it's just hilarious. But Thomas, this is very, very bullish that he's in this position through just 3 games. So he would be my favorite way to play it. But I mean, if you think about the matchup, I think Kirk would probably benefit the most just because he's traditionally been used a little bit more underneath. He hasn't really been as much this year. He's got a 12.1 ADOT, but he runs a lot of routes from the slot. You would imagine maybe they could do a little bit more quick passing in this setup, and he could be a beneficiary there. But I agree. I mean, when you're thinking about like what this offense could look like in the situations where Kirk would be a really good pick, like it was a potent downfield passing attack, and Kirk is kind of soaking up underneath volume, and it's not a potent downfield passing attack at all. So, it's just sort of an ineffective passing offense to date, and this is a difficult matchup. So, not super excited.
Yeah, I will say we do in the legendary upside rankings, which are still a work in progress. We do have Kirk slightly ahead of Thomas. I'm just curious where you guys stand on that. Is that something you think will update weekly? Because I imagine that's potentially a decision some people might have in their leagues, like Brian.
I think we end up going to Kirk. I think we are going to Thomas there.
Yeah, I think
the weekly rankings there.
Yeah, weekly rankings. Yeah.
I
think I would flip that. And yeah, my last take on the Jaguars. The other thing that stood out to me on Trevor Lawrence this season versus last year, the rushing stats and lack of involvement in the rushing game, I did think were interesting. Trevor Lawrence, kind of underratedly a good athlete. I think he's effective running some read option stuff in the rushing game. He had a 7% designed rush last year, just designed rush rate last year, and a 6% scramble rate. This year, those are down to 2% designed rushes and just a 4% scramble rate. So I like to see Doug Peterson involve Trevor Lawrence a little bit more in the rushing game. I know that's not like going to be the focal point of the Jags offense, but you do see with these offenses that are kind of unstoppable now, the Bills, the Ravens, the Cardinals. I'm not saying that Trevor Lawrence is ever going to be like a Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen level rusher, but a little bit more of a threat of him in the rushing game maybe could open up some more passing for the Jaguars as well. Let's move on here to the Texans side of the ball. Texans are 2-1 going into this matchup against the Jaguars. Both Nico Collins and Tank Dell are banged up. It sounds like Nico is likely to go and Tank is likely to miss is the best prediction I can make now. Pat, how are you thinking about the Texans wide receivers going into this matchup? A pretty positive matchup, I think most are viewing it as against the Jaguars.
Yeah, this Nico Collins hamstring injury that popped up is a real bummer. I think he was at practice today, right?
Yeah,
he had a quote. Yeah, he had a quote today saying he's good to go. So I don't think we should be too worried. Yeah.
All right. Well, then the walkthrough is back to being Nico Collins cover boy, because I had it Nico Collins, and it was called Nico Collins. You know, it was named after him, and then I changed it to Houston because I was like, it's either Nico or Diggs. Because if Diggs is last man standing, then that's also pretty good. But if Nico's good to go, then he is one of the highest upside plays of the week. The reason I'm so excited about him in this matchup is that the Jaguars play a ton of man coverage, and Nico has been cooking man coverage since 2023, like not even just this season. They also don't double team a lot. I note in the walkthrough that this is a team that leads the NFL with a 61% man coverage rate, the Jaguars. They don't blitz. They're 28th in blitz rate. So they've got extra dudes. They could double team. But in Tyreek Hill, when Tyreek Hill was playing against them, they double teamed him on just 14% of his routes. One of the single man coverage routes that he ran was the one where he got loose for that 80-yard touchdown. Nico Collins has been incredible against single man coverage since 2023 with 4.83 yards per route run. That trails only Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, and A.J. Brown. And the thing about Collins, right, you kind of, when you're looking at these matchups, you're like, all right, the Jags, they haven't really double teamed a ton. They didn't double team Tyreek Hill much. Like that creates like a really high ceiling for like what happens if they leave Collins in single man coverage like that, which is foolish, and they shouldn't do that, but they might. But then it's like, well, what if they don't, right? What if they come to their senses and double team Nico Collins? But Collins has been double teamed on 36% of his routes this season. That's 89th percentile among wide receivers. And he has 3.02 yards per route run. So I think the floor here is still pretty high. Like I think Stroud is going to do well in this matchup. He just struggled against the blitz last week, but now he gets a Jaguars defense that doesn't have a pass rush. They're 30th in pressure rate. They're 25th in time to pressure. They're allowing explosive plays at a decently high rate. They're 21st there. They're 30th in EPA allowed per dropback. So this is a good matchup, just like period. And Stroud should have time to throw downfield, and then potentially Collins is in single man, and maybe they're taking this hamstring. I mean, I hope the Jaguars think this hamstring injury is real bad. They don't need to double Nico Collins because that just sets him up for such a huge week. So I think Collins provides you with like pretty high floor because of how good he's been, even when doubled. And then just an elite wide receiver ceiling if they don't treat him like an elite wide receiver on defense.
That makes sense. First of all, I wanted to say, what's going on this year with all the midweek hamstring pulls in practice? Did the NFL did they outlaw some kind of like steroid that used to prevent this, and now it's happening all the time? I mean, we've had George Kittle, A.J. Brown, Jaleel McLaughlin, I think even today, Davante Adams. Like there's an epidemic of practice injuries, which I'm frankly getting sick of. So let's please stop this. But I do agree to your point on Nico Collins. Even if you try to double team him, turns out when you're like 6'4", 220 pounds and run like a 4.3, maybe I exaggerated those a little bit, but he's really fucking big, really fucking fast. Double teaming doesn't always work in those situations. So yeah. What about Zach, curious your take on the more peripheral pass catchers here. Stephon Diggs, I think, has had kind of like a quietly hot start to the season, maybe buoyed by some touchdown luck. Dalton Schultz has kind of been a disappearing act so far. Any takes on whether you're playing these secondary pass catchers in Houston?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday with Nico looking like it sounded yesterday like he might be a true questionable, and so then I was
like he might be out. Like like if we got a DNP today, it's
right.
over.
Right. So I was very interested in Diggs yesterday. Today, hearing that Nico is fine, I'm still interested in Diggs. I just think it's a good spot all around for Texans pass catchers.
Yeah.
Man, I thought it might be Dalton Schultz week though if Nico missed, because Dalton Schultz is literally just it's a break glass in case of emergency pass catcher for the Texans, right? Like the first couple weeks, the Texans looked like they weren't really all that interested in throw. If they could avoid throwing, they were like fine to avoid throwing. And then when they do throw, it's like, well, we've got these three guys we would much rather get the ball to than Dalton Schultz. And then here you're looking at a matchup where, they're the favorite. They should set up to score a lot of points. They're still not, Joe Mixon did practice, right? So it looks like he might be back this week. Is that?
Yeah. I think there's a chance Mixon is back. That one still seems pretty questionable to me.
Yeah, it's dubious still, but he did practice, which I was kind of expecting him to just miss outright. So him practicing throws another wrench in it where maybe the Texans get back to their ways and they're more happy to run with Joe Mixon back in the lineup. So yeah, for the secondary options, like Diggs is certainly a good option still, I think. He's just not as attractive as if Nico had missed. Schultz is just kind of a dart throw. I think you can do worse than Schultz. Really with tight end at this point in the season, you're just looking for a guy who can scam a touchdown. And I think the Texans are going to be in a position where, you could scam a touchdown for Dalton Schultz. So maybe there's that. But yeah, Nico and Diggs are like far, far and away the way I'd prefer to play this offense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me with Schultz. Let's go on to the rushing side of the ball here. We have to make some guesses about injuries. Let's assume, Crane, we get reports. Mixon is good to go. No severe limitations going into this matchup against the Jaguars. Seems suddenly like a pretty good game script, potential matchup for Mixon. Are you pretty excited? Potentially low ownership because of the injuries in DFS, although you'd have to ask the experts there.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the injury stuff, but as far as the matchup goes, this is a pretty good matchup. Jaguars are kind of mediocre against the run, but I think the Texans are home favorites here. We expect them to play from ahead. They did go decently run heavy against the Colts in week 1, minus 4% pass rate over expected in that game with a 54% pass rate. They have shown willingness to pass this year, so they're not like, committed to dictating the run from ahead. But if they have Mixon back, obviously they're going to be a little bit more inclined to lean into the run game than if they have Cam Akers. So, I think, the Jags aren't terrible against the run, but they're only 31st in run stop win rate. The defensive line looks, fairly susceptible. The Texans haven't been a great running offense, but been without Mixon. So I think it would just be very dependent on like his health outlook.
Yeah.
But as far as the matchup goes, definitely set up pretty well if he's healthy. Got it.
We'll move on here. Oh, I do want to say breaking news. Davante Adams, we're not covering this game. Davante Adams has been ruled out for week 4. So that's also known as the last thing you see before he gets traded to the Jets.
Yeah. What was that? Is that an injury thing or a you don't want to be here anymore thing?
I don't know. My radar's it's not fully on. My tinfoil hat's not fully on yet. I still have it in the cupboard under my desk, but it's coming out pretty soon. Little suspicious.
It's out. I think mine's out.
Oh, yeah. Traded to the Jets would be so bad for fantasy. It would just nuke Garrett Wilson. Oh, it'd be really sad.
Yeah, let's jump right into that while we're talking about the Jets and conspiracy theories. Aaron Rodgers looking great here to start the year through 3 games. He gets a home matchup here against the Broncos. Starting on the Jets side of the ball, even with Aaron Rodgers playing well, Pat, should we be worried at all about Garrett Wilson's continued sort of middling box score results, even in this much improved Jets environment?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe if Adams goes there, sure. But I wanted to just talk really just briefly on this about Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, because I think this matchup is pretty interesting on the Jets side. I don't think it's very interesting on the Broncos side, to be honest. But we have this Broncos
Tyler Badie erasure.
Yeah, no, actually, yes. I mean, maybe, we'll see what he does in the fourth quarter. The Broncos have their 8th in EPA allowed per drop back. They're limiting explosive plays at the highest rate this year. They're first in blitz rate, and they have this really good pass rush. But their blitz rate is going to drop this week. I looked back at Vance Joseph, their defensive coordinator. He hasn't played Rodgers in like forever. so I don't have the NFL Next Gen blitz rate stuff from a Rodgers-Joseph matchup, but I did look at what he did last year, and he would dial up his blitz rate against like guys like everyone blitzes Jared Goff. He had a 58% blitz rate against him, but he only had a 14% blitz rate against Tua. You don't really blitz the Dolphins. They can punish you at least when Tua is healthy. So he kind of looks matchup dependent a little bit in terms of the quarterbacks he's facing. You would expect not to blitz Rodgers. Rodgers doesn't really get blitzed, and when he is blitzed, he's usually really good against it. He's third in EPA against blitz dropbacks this season. Still kind of the classic Rodgers experience there. So what does this defense look like when they're not blitzing, which is their thing? They're first in blitz rate. So I'm wondering maybe if this defense is like not as good when they're having to play a little bit left-handed here and not blitz so much. They still do have a good pass rush. They're second in pass rush win rates. The defensive line doing its job. I think that means that we're going to see a lot of quick targets, and Garrett Wilson has been the guy on these quick throws. He's seeing a 33% targets per out run on quick throws this year. Allen Lazard is at just 20%. Also, I think the gap between those two is going to grow. We heard Aaron Rodgers after the game last week talking about how he needs to, and he wasn't asked about Wilson, and he brings up, we got to get on the same page. Once we get on the same page with 5, the offense is really going to be clicking. And then Breece Hall has also been a part of that quick throw game. He's got a 29% targets per route run on quick throws. He doesn't run as many routes as Wilson, so he's seen 13 quick throw targets to Wilson's 22. But when he's on the field, he's a big part of getting the ball out quickly, which is, I think, going to be a point of emphasis this week because the Broncos pass rush is pretty good, even if they're not blitzing. But I think that we can kind of benefit from two ways. Maybe the Broncos defense ends up not looking as formidable when they can't blitz, and probably benefits still the top two guys that we care about, Wilson and Hall, who have been feasting on these quick targets.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think if I was picking between the two of them in a DFS lineup, I would lean towards Breece Hall. I'm sure he probably carries more ownership as well.
Yeah.
But Garrett Wilson, I am a little bit concerned about the matchup versus Pat Surtain here. If Surtain shadows Wilson, we've seen him kind of eliminate DK Metcalf in week 1, basically eliminate Mike Evans in week 3, sort of eliminated George Pickens in week 2. There was some weird injury stuff penalty stuff.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say I wouldn't give Surtain too much credit. I would give the refs more credit than Surtain.
Yeah, that one was weird, but still, DK Metcalf held for 3 catches week 1. Mike Evans 3 catches in week 3. Those are really good wide receivers that Surtain shut down on a lot of shadow coverage. So I do think it's probably more likely to go to Breece Hall. The other thing on Wilson, again, I'm certainly not in panic mode on Wilson. I will say, his 29% target share, that's a top 10 number in the NFL. The issue has not been them getting him the ball at sort of an elite rate. It's been his per target efficiency when he does get the ball. His 5.8 yards per target, that's 60th of 72 wide receivers this year with at least 10 targets. Kind of in the same range as the inefficient slot-only wide receivers, Greg Dortch, DeAndre Carter, Wan'Dale Robinson. That's certainly not the range you want to find Garrett Wilson, and I do think that rebounds. That said, this is the same story.
I mean, that's what if we're looking for players to target, we would look for low yards per target. It's week 4, right? So the outside of Deontay Johnson, I don't really believe in yards per target is this ultra sticky, because it's not sticky at all. So you want to bet on the underlying volume, the targets, and the yards per target won't sustain. A really, really low yards per target is just not going to be able to sustain. And by the same token, even with everybody out in the Eagles this week, I noted Dallas Goedert's got this crazy high yards per target. Don't buy the yards per out run straight up, because it's built on a yards per target. So and in a sense, I think that's bullish for Wilson as far as what could he rebound from where he's been. That's the setup I would want. I would want to see a lot of targets and a low yards per target.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Just the point I was trying to make with Wilson is, again, we saw the same issue his rookie year, second year in the NFL. That was certainly the Zach Wilson, Mike White, Tim Boyle effect, whoever they had back there at quarterback, peppering Wilson with targets very inefficiently. I don't think that's going to continue with Rodgers. I do think that it's just the slightest of red flags that we maybe have to reset our expectations of Garrett Wilson as like a potential top 5, top 7 NFL wide receiver. I'm just like, he just hasn't shown that to me in the same way that someone like Nico Collins, even these rookies, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, have in some ways. So I'm still very bullish on Garrett Wilson. It just would be nice to see it come to fruition, which I'm sure it will. Sometime
I would also note that, like, I don't really buy the Pat Surtain shadow coverage stuff. Now I probably don't have a limit set high enough on PFF here, but I just pulled up his coverage grade. He's 143rd among cornerbacks in coverage grade. That includes too many cornerbacks, but
yeah, I think what actually happens here, Pat, is they only grade corners when they get targeted. So that's my understanding, because I saw a thread on this. We should maybe fact check this and should know before the show, but someone had the same point, and they're like, yeah, that's because the way PFF does it is like very weird, and actually like it shows you as a bad corner if you never get targeted, because basically the defense like never tries to test you, and they only test you when the player is open, so it like skews it in that way, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That's the explanation I heard for that, because
with 20% of snaps, he's up to like 94th. So yeah. No, I mean maybe that is it. I don't know, but I don't know. Yeah, I think what I would like, Baker Mayfield melted down last. So the DK Metcalf one's interesting. Pickens did his thing. A bunch of stuff got called back. And then Mike, like the Bucks just melted down last week, in part because Baker was bad against the blitz. So that's, I guess I'm not really buying that as far as a narrative. I think it could be true, but I don't think it's a reason to. I just am yet to be convinced, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah. And if that is a narrative, I'm sure it's factored into the ownership and the price in these DFS contests too. So that's another part of it. Yeah. Sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm generally in the camp that the specific cornerback matchup stuff is like double and triple counted by the market, because again, it's factored into projections already. And number two, like, I think it's just people wanting to have something where they feel like they have some semblance of control or input over the decisions that they're making. They're like, aha, I'm thinking of a thing other people aren't. It's like, nope, everyone's actually thinking of this as well. It's being considered by the people that are doing projections. It's just an easy narrative for people to be like, but have you heard that Patrick Surtain is good? It's like, yes, people are aware that he's a good corner. I think typically that kind of stuff is overblown. And if it leads to any kind of ownership discount or anything like that on Garrett Wilson, I'm really happy to buy it. I mean, especially like this is a narrative thing where like you kind of have seen it play out with Aaron Rodgers before. When Aaron Rodgers talks about a guy, like when Aaron Rodgers wanted to get, the rookie, rookie offensive rookie of the year for Christian Watson, like he fed that dude a bunch of touchdowns intentionally, right? Like Aaron Rodgers just does this where when he wants something to go a certain way, like he's the one driving the bus, and the bus will turn where he points it. That's part of the other reason I'm pretty excited about this matchup for the Jets is we just saw the Jets kind of just walk all over the Patriots and not really like they had their foot on their throat pretty early in the game, and they're like, we're enjoying ourselves. This is great. Let's keep going. And so I don't really think that Aaron Rodgers is in, all right, we've got a big lead, let's salt it away mode right now. I think he's thoroughly enjoying himself when he gets into a game where he can just pour it on. And especially when you consider that Sean Payton had some not so nice things to say about Aaron's best friend forever and offensive.
Oh, that's right. The Nathaniel Hackett revenge game.
Because Aaron didn't get the revenge last year. Now, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys remember this. The Jets did get the revenge.
Yeah, they won. Yes. Yeah.
But if you were telling yourself, "Oh, Aaron Rodgers that's water under the bridge. The score is settled." That is never.
The river is dry. The water has never traveled under that bridge.
There's never been a drop of water that's gone under any bridge that Aaron Rodgers owns. So to me, this is like a man. I wonder how petty Aaron is feeling this week.
I would say if you're looking for narratives, Aaron Rodgers being petty carries a lot more weight with me than cornerback wide receiver matchups.
The thing that I would be concerned about, though, like just to counterpoint my own argument, is if they do get out to a big enough lead. I mean, they've shown that they like Braylon Allen, and he's shown that he's very good. I would not be surprised if this is a situation where Brees still gets a good amount of work and puts up a good fantasy game, but there's definitely some of the like upper quantile outcomes for the Jets offense as a whole where Brees's ceiling gets capped because they're just absolutely dog walking the Broncos, and then Braylon Allen is coming in and getting stuff. So that's the only like cold water I would throw on Brees, but I think that happens, infrequently enough, and that he can still get there even when that does happen. Like, I'm just saying, like,
the receiving. I think the receiving role for Brees is so important.
I just think like the 40-point game outcomes for Brees are like a little less, just because I don't think this opponent is quite as competitive. But I'm still very interested in both Brees and Garrett Wilson. I've actually been taking both of them together in dog bowl drafts. You can get Brees. Brees typically goes in the top 3 to 5 picks, and then Garrett Wilson is a for whatever reason, anyone else take Brees and Garrett Wilson together. And so, to me, that's just a pretty easy spot. They both protect very well. They've got a very small amount of negative correlation between. I think it's like either 0 or negative 0.01. So I'm not super concerned about them eating into each other very much. I think it's more so just a bet on the Jets offense. So I'm into both of those guys this week.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just to close the loop on Gardner, I did want to say the amount of targets he's gotten versus how many snaps he has on the field stands out as an outlier low. He's the second highest paid corner in the league. I agree with you guys.
Okay.
Like the coverage stuff, like generally, I think it's overblown. I do personally think Surtain is like maybe one of the exceptions, and I trust the fact that he's like the highest paid corner in the league more than like the PFF like coverage grade, to be honest. But I totally hear the points there.
Yeah, I mean, contracts are not a very efficient market, I would say generally. I'm totally open to the idea that the coverage grade is maybe missing a huge part of what the whole point of coverage is.
He's been targeted 8 times in 3 games this year.
That seems good.
Yeah. So that's what I think is like he's getting graded on those 8 times he was targeted and not the like 110 times the quarterback was like, fuck, we're not throwing at Pat Surtain. So that's my only point on those grades. Let's move on here to the Broncos like really quickly. This is more of like a deep like redraft conversation. Are we interested at all in Tyler Badie just like stashing? We're not playing him this week, but like should you be adding him in your 12-team league? Start with you, Pat.
I mean, I think we've added him in high stakes stuff. And you made a compelling case, I thought, on him of like just like what if he's something? In the cases where he's something, then all of a sudden he could really be something. But I do think in most worlds he's nothing. And we see this all the time over the course of the season. Like there's just a lot of these guys who pop up. Like I remember getting excited and making like waiver wire bids on Mike Boone a couple years ago. Like Mike Boone's going to be a thing. And like, so most of these guys are not anything at all. He got some time at the fourth quarter and had one nice run. I think outside of the one nice run, he had like 3-something yards per carry. This Gretsch broke down in stealing signals, but the other guys are not playing well. Specifically Javonte. So, Jaleel's efficiency is also bad, but he is more of a pass catcher. So I'm a little more optimistic. Maybe that turns around. But I mean, if he like, what if it's not a flash in the pan fourth quarter type thing? I just think in 12-team leagues, like Roshan is probably there. Like I want Roshan over Badie, like no question. Like I think
give me like Emmanuel Wilson over Badie, someone like that too, right?
Yeah. So I think we probably don't have the roster spot in a 12-team league, but in like a main event where like the waiver wire gets picked over every week, like he's already gone. He got picked up in a bunch of leagues, but I think that made sense. I think that it was good to add him.
Yeah. Zach, any takes on the Broncos backfield situation?
Yeah, I wasn't feeling the Badie stuff, but then you did make a pretty good case when we were talking about it earlier this week, and so I dug into it a little more, read what Pat's referencing and stealing signals for Ben's take on it. And I think I'm of the opinion that it's very, very likely that Javonte just hangs on to this for, like, if there's a guy that's going to be the benefactor of this offense getting it together for the running game, it's probably Javonte. And also, like, Badie has size concerns where what do you win when you win when Tyler Badie is the guy? Is like, he's super Jaleel McLaughlin. So, like, and Javonte's been the one who's bad. So it's like, I have a hard time seeing the path where it ends up being Badie gets enough to actually make it be like a really big win for you. I think you might be right that he could be the best pure rusher on the team. Like that, I don't think that's wrong. It's just like, if we were doing this as like real NFL general managers and you're like, we need to give Tyler Badie more work because he's the best rusher on the team, I'd probably be like, I think you're right. Let's take a crack at that. But for fantasy purposes, we're relying on Sean Payton's way that he's going to divvy up the workload. And we know that Sean Payton is a size queen and Tyler Badie just does not have the requisite size to satisfy Sean Payton. So it's like, that's the hardest part for me. Like, so anyway, I think it's a really good real life football take, but it unfortunately is probably going to be stymied by Sean Payton for fantasy football.
Yeah, I hear that, and I certainly can see a world where Javonte holds on to the backfield and maybe even has some value if the Broncos offense turns around. My take is just that we now have like a 20-game, 19-game sample of what Javonte Williams looks like coming off this multi-ligament ACL tear, and like there's no way of avoiding it. Like, he's one of the worst running backs in the NFL, like, you know, Gus Edwards, Zeke style in terms of like rushing efficiency. Like, it's just really bad. And you watch him on tape and he just doesn't have any of the power burst speed that he used to have. And he also fumbled last week and barely saw the field after that point. So I'm just not as sure. Like, I get that he held on to the job for all of last year. He's now a guy going to the final year of his rookie contract. I'm not sure like what allegiance Sean Payton really has to him. So
yeah,
I just struggle to like see much of the upside. And I also think the floor is really low. Like, yeah, I don't know. Even when they were targeting running backs at this like insanely high rate last year, Javonte was like replacement level, like RB2, RB3 territory. So I guess I'm confused with what we're aiming for here with Javonte Williams.
What I guess if I was going to make a pro Javonte case, I would say Bo Nix looked better last week than he did in weeks 1 through 2, and like legitimately better. Now, part of the problem is that a lot of that efficiency came with him scrambling, which doesn't help anyone but Bo Nix. And he, as a passer, just basically avoided mistakes. He didn't have an interception or a sack, but he didn't throw for that many yards. But it's his third game, you know, and he showed progress. So if we move towards Bo Nix becoming like a solid, capable NFL starter that helps everybody, then we have what you're saying about him not being efficient over 19 games. I think we do want to still say, you know, this is his second year back. This is the season where we really do want to see his efficiency improve. It has not. He's been bad. He has a minus 49 rush yards over expected. He has a 29% success rate. That's really, really bad. However, it is just 3 games. Devon Achane is currently second worst in rush yards over attempt. He currently has a 24% success rate. Kyron Williams is at minus 51 rush yards over expected with a 24% success rate. I don't think that means those 2 guys are dust. You know, I kind of do think it means DeAndre Swift is dust, who's at a 17% success rate and minus 83.
Yeah, it's
so,
good to pick and choose which players you think are dust.
It's good to pick, and Rachaad White is right next to him as well, like minus 46 and 23%. So, and Gus Edwards is right there. So yeah, it's like there are dudes in this range who are dust, and Javonte Williams is probably dust. But there's guys here that we think not only are not dust, but actually could be quite efficient, especially I would say Achane being in that mix. So I wouldn't, to me, Javonte Williams, it's like I was kind of somewhat throwing out last season, him coming back off this multi-ligament knee tear. We didn't expect, or prior last year was that he wasn't going to be as efficient, right? And he wasn't. Now prior this year is that he would improve. He hasn't so far, but it's not far enough for me to say that he's sort of destined to lose the job to kind of anyone. That's where I would I don't think that this job is open. I think Javonte could hold it in a probably uninspiring way, but for a while, like Zach is saying.
Yeah, the other thing just to point out, I mean, it's only 26 carries so far on the year, and a pretty shocking amount of them have been like from goal to go from the 4 yards and in. So it's like, sure, the success rate is going to look bad there when he can't gain a yard, but it's like it also was a goal line carry. And like he did have that one carry where he was in the end zone, but then there just wasn't a clear shot of it. So they ruled it that he was short. And also the stuff that like we can look at to evaluate, does this guy still have it? Like when he's in space, is he actually able to make people miss and do stuff where he's creating beyond what his offensive line is giving him? Well, he's better than Travis Etienne as far as elusiveness rating. He's right there with Devon Chan and Jonathan Taylor. Like, so his elusiveness rating, like where he's forcing missed tackles on defenders or breaking tackles, like it's actually not as bearish as some of the other metrics would have you think. So to me, if I really want to like target this Broncos backfield, because I think the offense is going to turn around, which I think there's reason to believe that they might get it together after watching Bo Nix last week. I think it's reasonable to think that they could improve from what their first 2 games and the third game looked like for production for the backfield. So I think Javonte is the easiest bet. Now, it's kind of hard for that to be something that's actionable because, like, okay, you're in your home league, like, I guess you can go the way that you do it. If you're wanting to if you're just the sweatiest home league person of all time, you make a trade and Javonte is not who you're trading for. He's the person that you don't even put him in the first trade offer. You send a trade offer.
I think Javonte's going to hit waivers probably after this game, to be honest. I don't think you need to be trading.
You throw him in as he balances it out, right? Oh, well, the first trade wasn't fair. Well, let's just throw Javonte Williams in. And the person was going to cut him anyway. So they're like, sure, yeah. So I don't think you send anything meaningful for him. You just send a trade where then you throw him in as the second thing to balance it out.
The upside to me, and how do we end up feeling like, whoa, what did we miss? Javonte's actually having a really good year. It's that Bo Nix forces defenses to play differently going forward. Javonte Williams has seen stacked boxes, 8+ defenders in the box, more than any other running back in the league this season, and not by a small gap. He's at 54%. Next highest is Jordan Mason at 39%. Then Derrick Henry at 34%. So he's constantly facing stacked boxes. And that, something like rush yards over expected tries to account for that. But like a lot of the best rush yards over expected guys have hit long runs. And it's going to be harder to do that against stacked boxes. He's not being set up now like DeAndre Swift. Part of the reason I'm a little bit more like, I don't think this is going to turn around. He's at 11% stack box rate. Like he actually has had some chances to hit some long runs. So I think that would be the narrative I would paint of like, actually Javonte recovers from this is the stack boxes lighten up as Nix becomes functional. Not amazing, but functional, so they can't just focus on taking away the run completely.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say on that, and I totally agree, Javonte, like, if you had to design a situation that was like impossible for a running back to succeed in, it looks something like the Denver Broncos so far. So
yeah,
I get it. The thing is, Tyler Badie has faced, again, 10. We're talking about like a 10 carry sample. He's faced stacked boxes at an even higher percentage of Javonte Williams. He looks totally fine in success rate, totally getting all the advanced metrics. Just eye test, like, again, all we have is a small sample, so all we can go off is like watching 8 or 9
but
carries.
Eye test in this case doesn't. It's
you
like
watch them,
we need Peyton's eyes to know.
Yeah, but Peyton's eyes benched Javonte for the entire second half last week, so that's all.
After a fumble,
he did actually play in the second half. They just didn't have a ton of snaps after the fumble. Like the Broncos didn't get the ball. He did.
Yeah, it was like 8 carries to Javonte's 8 carries for Badie.
Let's move
3
on.
for Javonte.
This is like not even actionable.
Yeah, no, we just. I'm sorry for pigeonholing the Tyler Badie conversation. Let's move on here to the Patriots and 49ers. Another super exciting game.
Let's do the Rams. I want to make sure we do the Rams and the Bears before we get out of here.
Oh, Rams and Bears. Okay, we can do the Rams and Bears. Starting here, Keenan Allen looks likely to return this week. Crane, how do you view the return of Keenan Allen impacting the target shares for the rest of the Bears wide receivers?
So, I mean, I think Keenan Allen should just like help the offense a little bit. He's actually been able to one of the things that I was noting last week with the Bears is that Caleb Williams had really been struggling with taking sacks or throwing the ball away or having passes batted, just things that don't lead to actual targets on his first read on the while still in the primary design of the play kind of ends, and that being a problem for the number one option in the offense, who I believe to be DJ Moore, but DJ Moore has just a 10% first read target rate, which is really low, the kind of thing you might see from like a third option in a passing offense. But the offense is basically like not clicking, I think is what we were seeing. And then last week we saw it click a little bit more, where Rhamondre actually was the one who stepped up and had a big game. Rhamondre, it's nice because he's got an 18.3 ADOT and has been really nice on some of these big plays. So Keenan Allen coming back definitely makes life a little bit more difficult. It makes things a little bit more unpredictable as far as predicting Rome and DJ Moore. But I think he helps the offense because he's actually been the first three targets to him have been succeeding. He's 23% first read target rate and 31% targets per out run. So he's earning targets. He seems to have a connection with Caleb Williams a little bit. More importantly, the Rams are just a really bad pass defense. They're 31st in EPA allowed per dropback. They're allowing explosive plays at the third highest rate. They're 26th in dropback success rate against. So this is like a pretty strong matchup. This is the type of matchup where I would expect Caleb Williams, especially after flashing last week. It was an up and down performance. He looked not great at times, but at the end of the game, I thought he looked pretty good. He was dialed in, kind of zipping throws over the middle. And this is kind of, maybe not a get right spot because we haven't seen it yet, but like potential like breakout spot for Caleb Williams. I want to be, starting his receiver. Like I'd be breaking ties toward Bears receivers in this matchup.
Yeah, other wide receivers to face the Rams this season. We have Jameson Williams went for 5, 121 and 1 in week 1. Marvin Harrison 4 for 130 and 2 in week 2. Jawan Jennings with 11, 175 and 3 in week 3. So it's certainly been a defense to target so far this season. Zach, anything to add on the Bears pass catchers here?
Yeah, definitely interested in Keenan Allen. I think just him coming off the injury has people a little gun shy on him. I think a lot of people want to see it before they play it, and I'm with Pat that I want to play it before I see it here. And just a note on Keenan's usage in the offense, the little bit that we saw before he left with injury this season, but his average depth of target was over 11 yards. Like it's not the little dink and dunk PPR scam stuff. Like he was getting down the field. DJ Moore is more like the short area guy. Like DJ Moore is how the Bears run the ball. Actually, like the handoffs to DeAndre Swift are just like to make the front office feel like they didn't totally screw the pooch this offseason. But DJ Moore is the actual running game for the offense. He just they have to run it through the air. And then Keenan and Rome are the ones that operate more down the field. And so I think the way that you want to play it against the Rams here is probably just, have a shot at each of them. Although I saw that Rome got added back to the injury report. So yeah, I think
he was I thought he was removed today, like maybe during even the show. Even
maybe
he was removed. Yeah. You're right. He was added. He was removed today. So I think we should feel good about it.
So yeah, to me, it's probably just a pretty volatile situation where it's like take shots on all of them. We know this is a spot to attack, and you don't want to be overly precise with like, I know it's going to this guy. Like, no, you don't. Shut the fuck up. Like you just know this is a good spot to target, and don't pigeonhole yourself into it being one of these specific guys that gets here. The nice thing is, like, if you're doing battle royale drafts or the dog bowl qualifier, Keenan Allen goes so late. He is entirely free, like 5th, 6th round type of free. People are taking just absolute silly picks ahead of him, so he's a really easy. Like, here's a question: you want Christian Kirk or Keenan Allen?
Keenan Allen.
Is there a third option?
I mean, that's
Keenan Allen. Yeah.
See. George Pickens or Keenan Allen?
Pickens.
I think Pickens.
Greg Dortch or Keenan Allen?
Keenan Allen.
Keenan.
Yeah, because that's one that I see too. So it's like he just goes so late that it's like you're not even risking all that much. It's like, oh no, I passed up the opportunity cost of a Greg Dortch. How will I recover? So anyway, that's a spot I like it this week.
Nice.
That makes sense to me. I think Keenan definitely has the target upside. I think from like the home league redraft perspective, I would not have a ton of confidence in starting Keenan Allen coming off this heel injury. Like I kind of want to see it first if I have maybe a more stable, predictable looking option, but certainly get it in these like large field contests where seeing it or getting it right before you see it has a huge advantage. That makes a ton of sense to me. Quickly, let's get to the tight end here. Cole Kmet seems to be taking over the role from Gerald Everett. How seriously should we be taking Cole Kmet in this new role if we think it's going to be stable? Are we talking like top 10, top 15 tight end? Where do you stand, Pat?
Zach, why don't you take this one first?
I mean, I think Cole Kmet's a really good player, so I'm interested for that reason, but I'm worried that he might have just been getting the usage last week out of necessity because the Bears didn't have Keenan Allen. They were dealing with injuries, and so Cole Kmet kind of stepped in as that third pass catching option. I mean, I would hope like that a competent offensive coordinator would see what Cole Kmet did last week and be like, we should involve this guy more. But I just don't think that's logical to assume that Shane Waldron's operating that way. I mean, it does seem like he put Gerald Everett, back in the box. I don't think Gerald Everett is going to be ruining Cole Kmet's snaps too much more going forward. I'm just worried about the overall pass volume for the offense, actually being able to be enough for Kmet to produce with all three receivers healthy. So that's my only concern on Kmet. Mm-hmm. But you absolutely can do worse, and I think he's a talented player. So, in tournament formats, he's a very reasonable play to me. In a home league, I mean, the problem with the tight end position in a home league is if you don't have one of the few guys that you feel great about starting, it's like Cole Kmet's is good enough.
There's one man, his name is Brock Bowers this week. Like literally not like Kelsey doesn't feel great anymore. I guess Goddard feels pretty good.
Yeah, Goddard with everyone deceased around him. Kittle coming back with no competition. Those are the ones that I'm thinking of.
Kittle coming off a soft tissue injury where we don't know how healthy he is one of the best plays of the week at tight end. So
it's not as comfortable as it could be. One of the most volatile tight ends of all time coming off a soft tissue injury. Yeah.
And he's one of the best options. Yep.
Yeah, easily. Yeah,
I will say
the problem with not playing Cole Kmet is you have to play a different tight end. So, yeah, I think he's a low end tight end one. Yeah,
that's where I'm at. Like
Zach Ertz is kind of interesting as like it's a high game total and he gets targets.
It's honestly pretty interesting.
It's a home league thing where like I'm not getting 0 this week because I played Zach Ertz who got 4 targets for 38 yards. It's not sexy by any, but it's like this isn't a 0 is what I'm putting in my lineup.
I would just note on Kmet that 33% route participation last week. Shane Waldron's like, oh, Gerald Everett's like totally a good tight end. This is going to work really well. It doesn't work at all. Goes to 62%, so he already passes Everett in week 2. He was at 73% last week. It's not just the playing time, though. He had a 24% first read target rate. So they're calling plays where he is the first read very clearly, and a 27% targets per out run overall. Now, that is with Keenan Allen out, and I don't expect that to continue. But it shows that this whole Gerald Everett experiment, I think, is completely over. Like, there's just no way that, he's out there getting targeted like that on pretty good, not elite route participation, but pretty good if he hasn't kind of completely. So I don't know if someone had to pull Shane Waldron aside and was like, this has to stop.
Yeah, so you're getting fired. It's you or Gerald Everett.
It's you or Gerald Everett. Yeah, so yeah, his self-preservation kicked in, and now Cole Kmet, I think, is very clearly the starting tight end again, even if the target tree is a little hard to predict with Allen back.
Yeah. I just want to add on our like priors with Kmet. I do think some people like view him as this like really boring, like bad tight end, which I sort of get. He did look kind of like boring to start his career, but last year, 1.7 yards per route run, playing in that Justin Fields offense that was pretty atrocious for the most part. Like 1.7 yards per route run in that environment is really, really strong for a tight end. That was like the same as Sam Laporta, better than Kincaid, better than Pitts. Like the best tight end in the league last year was only at 2 yards per route run. Komet was at 1.7. So obviously entirely different environment this year. New quarterback, more target competition. I'm not saying that is going to be sticky year to year, but I do think Cole Kmet is just like a better talent than people give him credit for. I think a lot was kind of missed in this whole like route participation conversation this offseason where people were hating on Kmet, the talent. And I actually think he's like a fairly talented tight end. So yeah, if I have him in a home league, like I'm starting him over Mark Andrews. I'm starting him over Hunter Henry, Dalton Schultz. I'm kind of swinging for the upside with Kmet, even though I know the rug pull of one catch for 9 yards is firmly in the range of outcomes. Let's move on here to the Rams quickly. I think this is a little bit more straightforward with Kupp and Puka out in terms of startable fantasy options. Is there anyone in the wide receiver core, Sack, that you're excited about this week? It's, Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson would be the top two options, and then Tyler Johnson, Jordan Whittington also hanging around there.
The short answer is no. If you made me pick one, it would be Tutu, but yeah, no. Like if you find yourself and you're about to start Tutu Atwell in any format, like I promise there's something that's better out there. You don't have to do this to yourself. Like,
yeah. I was hoping for a little bit more excitement for our short king Tutu, but yeah, I probably largely agree. The only thing I'll say,
showdown slates, I think you can maybe
there you go. Yeah, Tutu's a great play on the showdown.
Great play. Slate. Honestly, he might not be a great play because the ownership will be too high. But you can find something. I think it is Tutu of anyone that's interesting. I guess what I would note, and this is just bearish, but the 49ers run defense is like not as good as I think we were thinking it would be, but the Bears run defense is pretty good. So I'm not super bullish about the Rams. they're going to want to run stuff through Kyren here, and they basically need Stafford to step up with these wide receivers who aren't very good in a pretty difficult matchup. But if they try to just like run it through Kyren, I don't think that's actually going to go very well this week. So that would be maybe like the cold water I might throw on the Bears breakout is like we finally get Caleb being really efficient, but can the Rams push back at all to give us some volume? It's still probably fine in DFS and stuff because you're not, Caleb isn't going to be super expensive, but it would be nice if the Rams could push back, and I'm nervous that they can't.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Not much more else to say here on the Rams for me. Let's move on. I think two more games we're going to try to cover quickly. Crane, you wanted to cover the Cardinals game. I guess we have, Cardinals versus the Commanders in the 4:00 window this week. Cardinals at 1-2 versus the surprisingly 2-1 Washington Commanders. What was the angle you wanted to cover here, Crane? Is it Jaden Daniels, QB1 overall?
I think it was when we were talking about the Broncos that I said this. I was like, we got to do something fun. Half the pod's about Tyler Badie, so let's talk about a game that might actually be pretty good. We have. I think this game is interesting because you got to figure out what's going to happen with Trey McBride out on the Cardinals side, and I mean, to me, I'm pretty excited about Marvin Harrison, who's already kind of stepped up and passed Trey McBride as the top guy in the offense as far as the first read targets are concerned. He's got a 19% first read target rate, only 14% for McBride. Now, McBride has a 24% targets per route run, besting Harrison at 22%. And their target shares are very close, 24% McBride, 25% for Harrison. So it's like not clear who the number one here is. But I think from an offensive design perspective, it already is Harrison. And, the question is basically, can he continue to develop and, take advantage of the role that he has already in the offense? And I mean, this Commanders defense, like the answer I think is going to be yes. They're dead last in EPA allowed per dropback, 31st in dropback success rate. They're not really getting pressure. The one thing they're good at is that they defend the deep middle of the field pretty well, but Kyler doesn't throw there. So they're like, if your strength is, not even relevant, Kyler's going to scramble around and probably throw it down to the sidelines to Marvin Harrison. He should be able to do that pretty well here. So I'm kind of excited about Kyler here. I'm excited about Marvin Harrison. I'm not as enthused about Elijah Higgins filling in. I think a lot of what McBride has been doing has been because he gets open and he's got a really good connection with Kyler and he kind of earns those targets. As I was saying, like they're not as built into the play calling as it might seem. Not that Higgins isn't playable, but I'm not like super psyched about him. And then, Greg Dortch maybe soaks up a little bit more of that underneath volume. But if you look at Open Score was just released, and not in time for me to include it in the walkthrough, but they just threw it out there. And Michael Wilson is wide receiver 56. Greg Dortch is wide receiver 60 in Open Score. That's dead last. So not an impressive group behind Marvin Harrison, who's wide receiver 23 in Open Score. So I think this could be like, we already had like a big Marvin Harrison game, but this could be another really big Marvin Harrison game where maybe he proves he can kind of handle targets funneling his way.
Yeah. I'd say Michael Wilson quickly on the radar, deeper home leagues at wide receiver 4. If you've had a bunch of injuries, like hopefully you can do better. I think with McBride out, he's how I'd play it and like hope for a touchdown or something. But yeah, not a super attractive option. Sack, anything to add on this game?
Yeah, I've been super aggressive for Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. Been taking him very, very aggressively in the dog bowl drafts I've been doing. I do think that in that specific format, mixing in someone like Dortch or Michael Wilson is not a bad way to attack a game that should be one of the highest scoring games on the slate. I'm just trying to get pieces in this game. And I, again, just don't want to be too overly precise. Like if I had to pick, it would definitely be Marvin Harrison, like that's the way I want to play it. But yeah, I think those peripheral pass catching options for Arizona are definitely interesting. I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on the rushing options in this game, both from James Conner and Brian Robinson. Do you think that these are pieces that you would want to include in a game stack, or is it like I'm thinking specifically for James Conner? I maybe want to play James Conner when I'm saying that the game does not go that crazy and it's just James Conner really slowing everything down. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that on Conner. I am more open to including Brian Robinson, who, with Eckler dealing with a concussion, I mean, he has a 9% target share, which isn't great, but Eckler has a 12% target share. And he's been decently efficient yards per route run this year. Brian Robinson, 1.17. He was like strangely efficient last year because he had a couple long receptions that spiked the number, but he's like not a total zero in the receiving game. It hasn't been for a couple years now. So I'm pretty interested in Robinson consolidating that backfield, which includes like a decent amount of receiving because Jaden Daniels is like just it's all short stuff, I mean, until Terry McLaurin catches a long ball, but like his average depth of completion is super low, and so it's leading to a lot of targets for the running backs and potentially Brian Robinson getting all of that work this week. So I think Robinson is maybe even the more interesting of the two straight up, but probably the more interesting of the two. I feel stronger about that if I'm playing the game to be like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I think it's really going to consolidate around Robinson, even with Eckler, still in for 23% of the snaps in week 3. Robinson still got to 75%. It's going to be some combination of like Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez behind him. Neither guy has really proven much of anything in the NFL. So I would expect like a really, really heavy Brian Robinson workload this week. Last game here, I guess we'll cover, unless anyone wanted to jump in with more thoughts there, is the Patriots and 49ers. I think on the 49ers side of the ball, we're going to get George Kittle likely back this week, though that's not fully a guarantee yet. We still have Deebo Samuel likely out. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey still out in San Francisco. Curious what you think, Sack, of the Juwan Jennings breakout. How seriously should we take him? With Kittle returning, but he still seems like a pretty good lock to be on the field all the time with Deebo Samuel still out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing like in tournament formats, not a home league thing where you're considering ownership, the field has gotten a lot better about not necessarily, overreacting to negative results in the previous week and being willing to play a guy coming off of a bad game. But the field is still really, really thirsty for chasing points from good games. So I think we'll probably see Juwan Jennings come in over-owned this week relative to where he should be. Really, the way I'm most interested in playing this is through Kittle, just because I think you have the uncertainty around his health. And Purdy and Kittle have been really like when Kittle has to be the primary guy, like it becomes just like we saw with Juwan Jennings last week, where he just got all the touchdowns. That's what Kittle has done with Purdy in the past when the other options have been out and Kittle's had to really bear the brunt of the receiving work. So very interested in Kittle this week. Totally fine playing Ayuk too. I think he is a really solid option there. But just don't want to get too out over our skis on Juwan Jennings just from the one monster week. He's certainly if you're in a home league and you need a start at wide receiver, you could definitely do worse. But don't expect I'd say even a third of the production that he gave you last week, right?
Yeah, for sure. Last week's going to stand out as the ultimate outlier in his career. I will say he does, like, in his career, win just one of the four of, Deebo, Kittle, Ayuk, or McCaffrey is out. He has been like a 20, 21, 22% targets per route run guy. So it wasn't like entirely fluky in the sense that he does get a lot more involved in the offense when those guys are out. That's, that makes sense. But again, 11 for 175 and 3. I'm sure that's going to be, overly baked into his price and to his expectations this next week. And versus the Patriots does not stand out to me as a matchup where he's, overly exciting. Crane, anything to add there on the 49ers pass catchers?
Well, just interesting that, in open score, as I mentioned, just got released. He's wide receiver 8. So, it wasn't just that, he was out there and happened to get lucky. Like, he was getting open. Now it's all
he's a fun player. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, he's interesting. Like, this matchup looks pretty good to me. I don't think the Patriots defense, right, with the week 1 win, for Cincinnati, right? They, I'm not losing my mind. They beat Cincinnati in week 1.
They
right?
did. Yeah.
Okay. That is factually accurate.
Yeah. It seems crazy, but they did do it. So, we're like, oh, Patriots defense, they've been talking about how they're going to have a good defense and they really want to have one. So they must have one. It doesn't actually look that good. They're 26th in EPL out per dropback, 27th in dropback success rate, pressure rate 28th. Like this, they can be passed on. I think that the 49ers will be totally fine here. So I'm like, oh, looks like a pretty good bounce back spot for Brandon Ayuk. Maybe he finally gets right this year, but like, I don't know. Stuff is weird, like we're like always surprised about who has really good seasons. It wouldn't shock me. Juwan Jennings was really good in the Super Bowl, and then he brings that in and has a good 2024 season. Like that would make.
He got paid. They
sense.
paid him.
They paid him. Yeah,
like
so
$20 million guaranteed, knowing they were drafting Ricky Pearsall. Like,
yeah, I don't know.
Insane.
It doesn't. They kind of have too many receivers now, but whatever, So I guess I would be open to Jennings, continuing to be a big part of the offense, and it not immediately reverting back to Brandon Ayuk, because like Brandon Ayuk held out in the offseason and he hasn't really looked like Brandon Ayuk yet. I'm hoping that changes. I think that could change this week, in a really big way, but it could also not change at all this week. And, Jennings could be out there and getting a lot of targets again.
Yeah. For me, just like the film eye test stuff on Jennings, like Purdy just is such a good quarterback in terms of getting the ball out on time that when the route is designed for Jennings, because of his size and just like consistency, it doesn't even matter that he's not, to me, that great of a route runner. He's not that good of an athlete. It's just that timing and chemistry with Purdy can be really strong when they design looks for him. So Yeah, I think that explains the whole thing. Like when Deebo, Ayuk, Kittle, McCaffrey are all healthy, you're not going to be designing 30% of your plays to Juwan Jennings. But
No.
once you start eliminating those guys, you can design stuff for him, and he's pretty good at it. So, yeah, he really is kind of like a rare contingent upside wide receiver for me that, in the Dontavian Wicks range of guys that I think we're pretty interested in when
he's the new Kendrick Bourne for the 49ers.
Exactly. Yeah. That's
the
a good comparison.
Dontavian Wicks comparison is good too. I like that. That's a good way to frame it.
I like that too.
Yep. All right, Patriots side of the ball. I mean, come on, we're just rooting for Drake May to get out there at this point. Is there anything else to say? I got nothing.
Hang on, I've got something to say on the Patriots side of the ball. This is like the sneakiest smash spot of all smashes for Rhamondre Stevenson.
Yes.
The 49ers don't have a good run defense, and it just got worse. Javon Hargrave ripped his tricep off. That shit is all the way gone. It is like a piece of beef jerky just torn in half. It's gone now. So Javon Hargrave out for the season. 49ers have a couple other injuries on their defensive line right now too. Most of these guys look like they're limited heading into Friday practice. So it seems like most everyone else is going to be able to suit up and play, but I mean, they already were not good, and then losing Javon Hargrave, I think, is kind of a big deal. And Rhamondre's been getting an incredible workload. I mean, really, the only game where we saw Rhamondre kind of dud was against the Jets, and it was just because the game was an absolute shit show from the jump for the Patriots.
Well, he also hurt his pinky or something.
He did. He got caught in the face mask. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he missed a bunch of snaps.
Yeah, so definitely interested in Rhamondre this week. I think it could be a really sneaky spot for him. I just don't think the field is not caught up to the fact that the 49ers are a run defense to target. I think their reputation is just kind of hanging on and doing a lot of work for them. So really like this is a spot for the Patriots to try to play ball control and establish it with Rhamondre, and perhaps just try to lean into, hey, let's try and minimize the total number of plays that the 49ers get. See if we can just sneak out a win with the ball bouncing our way a couple times in a low play volume kind of game. So I think Rhamondre is a really interesting way to play it because it basically allows you to be like, and nothing else happens in this game. Like the Patriots were successful and they took the air out of the ball and they just ate a bunch of clock, and there's no plays that happen in this game outside of the ones that go to Rhamondre. So it lets you fade all the, Brandon Ayuk, projects pretty well this week. George Kittle, once he's officially in this week, I think it's going to project very well. You got people that are still on the Juwan Jennings stuff. So I just think Rhamondre is a nice way to leverage off of some 49ers pieces that project very well.
Yeah, I mean, Mason probably does pretty well in that environment. And, the Patriots not great against the run, and obviously we're going to see a lot of work from Mason here on the ground. But I completely agree with you on Rhamondre. I think this is a run defense to target, and in part because the 49ers want to run the ball themselves, so they're not going to completely run away from teams most of the time. It's sometimes they will, but generally, the other thing with the Patriots, I wrote this in the walkthrough. It's what are the goals here? What are the Patriots trying to do? When the kickoff happens, they're going to try to win this game, but when they're down 13 in the third quarter, is it more about saving face? Right? Is it more about trying to just get out of there in the least embarrassing way possible? And that involves Rhamondre because they can't protect the quarterback. That's why Jacoby Brissett is their quarterback right now. They're dead last in pass block win rate. They're 28th in PFF's pass block grades. They're 29th in time to pressure. They're 31st in pressure rate. Brissett has been pressured on 48% of his dropbacks. Yeah. And yet, he has a 47% success rate, which is pretty solid. His success rate is right there with Sam Darnold, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Derek Carr. He's been, honestly, Brissett has been pretty good as far as just not blowing it consistently, right? In a bad situation. Now, does that make me interested in any of the Patriots pass catchers? No. I mean, I guess Hunter Henry is kind of a high end tight end 2 type is viable, but mostly he's probably going to be able to keep things on the rails down to down in a way that makes Rhamondre a little bit more interesting. The Patriots probably should be a negative game script that pushes them to the air, but I just kind of am betting against them ever operating like a typical team would when down, because they're just trying to like get this game over with. If they get out to a lead and everything, then great, but then we'll see Rhamondre anyway. So yeah, I don't think you can force them to the air like a typical trailing team.
Yeah. I will just say on the Hunter Henry point, I think that's the only relevant Patriots pass catcher to worry about. He does lead all tight ends this season in target share, 25%, and air yard share at 34%. So
he's their number one.
Yeah. In leagues that are points for air yard share, definitely a really, really strong start for Hunter Henry in New England. But yeah, no, more seriously, I think with the current tight end landscape, again, I'm not up to date on his ownership projection, things like that in DFS, but like Hunter Henry, he's had 2 weeks where he did nothing, 1 week where he went off. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't rule out him leading the field in tight end scoring this week. Like anything could happen. And if he's coming in really low owned, really cheap, I think he's a pretty decent option as well.
I think we should all start making tight end hot takes, because it's such a terrible tight end year that like you pick the tight end 15 and pick him to be the tight end 1 in any given week, and it's
a good bet. Yeah,
actually happen. Yeah.
Cole Kmet, best tight end in the NFL. Calling it here.
Yeah. Tyler Conklin, tight end 1.
Yeah. It is ugly for the tight end position. Anyways, that's all we're covering here today. Again, tons of more great breakdowns on legendaryupside.com. Pat goes in detail through all of these games, really cool charts, lots of in-depth statistics at all positions. So yeah, Pat, anything else on the walkthrough or anything else you want to talk about on Legendary Upside?
Yeah, check out the walkthrough. Drops every Friday morning. And check out Sackreligious' article that he had this week on best ball advance rates. And Pete actually said it made him panic a little more. So it wasn't. But it's interesting to see kind of what. I guess, Sack, do you want to explain that article a little?
Yeah, it's just kind of like a reality check for people that are freaking out or victory lapping their week 3 advance rates of, hey, there's still a long season to go. Here's what we've seen historically. And kind of how sticky your advance rates might be to this point. I won't say too much more. It's a pretty short read. So head on over to Legendary Upside. That one is free.
That one's free.
It's not behind the paywall.
Yeah,
I also just had one come out earlier this week as well for all of the Best Ball Mania 5 diversification numbers, ran the Jacquard similarity for every max entry drafter, and then also did that for some leg up subscribers who didn't max enter, but asked if they could be included in the Discord. Some fun stuff there about diversifying your portfolio and how you can manage your risk across your portfolio and really, not be taking on excess risk that's not giving you anything. It certainly is a game where you want to lean into risk, but you want to do so prudently. Anyway, both those articles definitely would recommend checking out.
Yeah, and I really like that. The Jacquard score. Last year it showed that I had a higher Jacquard score than Pat, so that just kind of proved better than a best ball.
So you weren't able to take stances? Is that what you're saying? You just
just 8% of every player, baby. Yeah. That's all you need.
Everyone was so surprised that I was undiversified. I had like a 21st.
Mine dropped this year because of Drake.
Mine too. Yeah, because all the guys we were targeting were going later, so I had bigger.
You guys tell everyone to diversify, and then you just take even harder stands. That's very curious.
That's how we get
very interesting. Yeah.
No, I mean we did. The fun thing about the Jacquard stuff is that it's not necessarily about being the most diversified. It's about you take your stands, but then you build a wide variety of teams around those stands as opposed to just building the same team every time. But yeah,
I like to build the same team every time.
You just want to build the same team.
Yeah. You guys do you.
Okay. I'll also shout out, we got rest of season rankings and weekly rankings. You guys are helping out with those, and they're out right now. We'll be updating the weekly rankings up through Sunday. And the quick slant. Check out Matt Irby's quick slant articles that'll be out. The Sunday night one will be out tomorrow morning, and then 2 Monday night football games will also be covered later in the week. So, I think probably Sunday evening we'll get those out. But yeah, the quick slants, the walkthrough, all sack stuff, all the rankings, Stephanie's waiver wire article, legendaryupside.com. All right, we'll get out of here. I forgot that I had to hit the end recording.
Sorry,
it was a pretty good
you
ending that I did there.
Yeah,
That's a
I
great
think
ending.
that
All right,
that,
we'll see
that
you
was
guys
a
later.
functional. That was a functional ending.
See you guys next week.